Morning, boys and girls. Okay, English today. We're going to be exploring figurative language, particularly in a poem, and I'm going to start by reading you a poem. It was written by someone called Siegfried Sassoon during the First World War. I know the work we're doing is actually on the Second World War, but this poem could apply to soldiers or war generally. So I'm going to start by reading it to you. I want you to listen carefully. I'm not going to go through it in too much detail initially. It's printed on your work for today, and there's some useful vocabulary on there that you might want to take some time to read and have a think about. But while I'm reading it, I just want you to think about how it makes you feel. And if you think the author felt the same way. It's called How to Die. Dark clouds are smouldering into red, while down the craters morning burns. The dying soldier shifts his head to watch the glory that returns. He lifts his fingers towards the skies where holy brightness breaks in flame, radiance reflected in his eyes and on his lips a whispered name. You'd think to hear some people talk that lads go west with sobs and curses, and sullen faces white as chalk, hankering for wreaths and tombs and hearses. But they've been taught the way to do it, like Christian soldiers, not with haste and shuddering groans, but passing through it with due regard for decent taste. So have a think, have another read through it when you look at the work, and really think about how it makes you feel. Although I said I'm not going to go through it in too much detail, there is one example that I just want to include. In the second stanza you will see it says, you'd think to hear some people talk that lads go west with sobs and curses. Go west is a metaphor for dying, okay, which takes me very, I would say nicely, but it leads me neatly into the figurative language that we're going to be looking at today. So why, you might be asking, have I got shampoo written up behind me? It's not to remind me to wash my hair. It's not to remind me that I need shampoo from the shops. It's a really good way of remembering the different types of figurative language, okay? So it helps you remember them and analyse them. I would normally do what I normally do in class and ask you for suggestions. So you're going to have to think of your suggestions and then just see if you are right. So the first one stands for symbolism. And we talked about symbolism last week in terms of the video, and particularly the letters and the paper soldiers, how one object was used to represent something else. So I think you're all fairly secure on symbolism. Now, what could the H be? This isn't one that we've used much. It's a strange word. It looks like hyperbole. It is not hyperbole. It's called hyperbole. It's from a Greek word, okay? Hyperbole. And it means over-exaggeration. So when I say to you, oh, I've told you 1,000,000 times, I haven't actually told you 1,000,000 times. I might have told you 2 or 3 times. I'm exaggerating. It's an example of hyperbole, okay? It's the same if you say, oh, I could eat everything on the menu. You probably couldn't, you'd be sick. You might be hungry, but it's that over-exaggeration. It's figurative language. It has an effect. Alliteration is the next one. We can all use alliteration, the repetition of the initial letters of the words, okay? We can do that. We can have crunchy carrots. We can have, I don't know, rockin' robin. There's lots of examples of that, and you're all really good with that one. Right, M. Metaphor and simile. Again, these are ones you're really good with, particularly similes. A simile is when you describe something as being like or as something else, Okay, so an example of that in the poem is white as chalk. And as I said, a metaphor was go west. They're actually talking about dying, but they're not referring to it directly. They're not actually going west. They're not, getting on their horse and riding towards the setting sun. Metaphorically, they are. P, what could P be? Have a think. It's one, again, that we've used in writing. We've used it quite often with trees. Trees are very good to use with personification. It's not exclusively for trees, but they're very good because they have branches that are like arms and twigs that are like fingers. So, the scrawny arms of the tree wrapped around me. It hasn't really got arms, has it? But it makes it all sound very alive and very real and actually quite spooky. I love the last two, the ooh at the end, and that's a bit of a clue because the first one is on, o, mat, o, Pia. You don't need to remember. I've put too many I's in that. P-O, excuse me. I've done exactly what I tell you not to do. I've scribbled. Okay. Onomatopoeia. You don't need to know how to spell it, but you do need to know what it is. It's a word that represents a sound. Ooh would be a good one. Thwack. Moo. Squeak. Any word that represents a sound is your onomatopoeia. And the last one is another lovely word, I think. Oxymoron. Okay. What is oxymoron? Oxymoron is when you're using words that contradict each other. Okay. So you might hear people talking about deafening silence. Well, how can something be deafening, which suggests it's really, really loud, and also silent, which means there's no noise? But it's a phrase that's used, deafening silence. People say it's a living death. Well, living and dying are clearly opposites. Put them together and it's an oxymoron. You can use it for lots of things. So what I want you today is I want you to think very carefully about the poem and analyse it. I want you to look for examples of these different types of figurative language that the author uses. Now, if you can print it off and stick it in your book, it's going to make life easier for you because you can use a different coloured pencil or highlighter or whatever to underline or mark examples for each one. But please do give me a key. So if you decide you want to underline your an example of symbolism in red, if you could do me a little key at the bottom and give me a little red bit and write symbolism, we can see exactly what we're talking about. If you can't print it off, it's absolutely fine. Write out each of the types of figurative language and alongside it record your example. So I had one for metaphor and simile actually, didn't I? So I could have go west and white as chalk. Hopefully yours would fit on one line and look a lot neater than that. Okay, so I hope you're clear with what you're doing. Identifying the figurative language that's used in the poem. There's some quite deep thoughts within the poem. Don't get too hung up at this point with it. All right? While you're doing it, see if you notice anything about the rhyming and we'll look at that tomorrow. Okay? Any problems? Let me know and I'll do my best to help you. See you soon. Bye.